This is Office Hours with SIU System President Dan Mahony, a monthly podcast that explores what's happening in and around American higher education. And now your host, SIU System President Dan Mahony.
Thanks for tuning in to Office Hours. I'm your host, SIU System President Dan Mahony. In this podcast, we're exploring what's going on in the world of higher education, including some of the major issues and challenges. Today, we're going to talk about a part of the college experience that can be challenging for a lot of students and families, navigating the admissions process and determining the costs of college. Today, I will be joined by two guests, our Vice Chancellors for Enrollment Management at SIU Carbondale and SIU Edwardsville. But before we talk to these talented individuals, I wanted to share a bit about my personal experience as a parent going through the admissions process. 4 years ago, my daughter Elena was applying to college. Now, I was not unfamiliar with the college admissions process at this point, obviously. I'd been working in higher education for over 25 years. I had been a president for over 5 years. I had read the research and was fairly well informed and even had gone through the process with my son. But this time I decided to do an experiment. My daughter and I are pretty similar. Our academic ACT, high school GPA, school activities were pretty much the same. And so I decided to make her my secret shopper so I could compare her experiences today with what my experiences were back in the 1980s. And I had her apply to 14 different colleges and universities. When I went through the process, I applied for 5. And there were several things that stuck out as different from and often conflicting with public narratives. One was the admissions process was easier and cheaper than it was back in my day. We used the Common App for 13 of the 14 applications that we did. Once we put the information in, initially it was really easy to add on more applications. In fact, at one point, Elena decided she wanted to apply to a different school that wasn't on our initial list. And frankly, it took us just a few minutes to add that additional application into the process. So it was not hard to do. The second thing was the application fees were often waived. When I was applying to 5 schools, I paid 5 application fees. I'm not even sure we paid 5 application fees across 14 institutions for my daughter. Next thing was that the speed from which we heard from institutions often was much faster. The first school we applied to was actually interesting. We applied, I remember, on a Thursday afternoon, and by Monday we had an admissions letter as well as a financial aid package. So it was relatively quick. Now, there were some that were longer. I will say one took 3 to 4 months, but many of them were much, much faster than it was certainly back in my day. And this is all before the direct admissions programs that are becoming more popular and we're looking to be doing here in Illinois, which we'll probably get into later. Second thing that was really interesting was that tuition and fees were really cheaper than I think most people realize, and frankly cheaper than it was back when I went to college. What happens a lot nowadays is we hear cost of college is going up, and it's focused very much on the published tuition as opposed to the net tuition and fees. And really, about 80% of the students do not pay the published tuition, according to the research. They pay something less, either because they have need-based aid or they have merit-based aid or some other type of support. Now, my daughter didn't have any need-based aid, obviously, but I did go through the FAFSA process. I will say that was probably the most challenging part. FAFSA's changed a little bit even in the last 4 years, and again, our guests may speak to that a little bit later. But one of the things that was really different was the scholarship offers. So I applied to 5 schools. Again, my academic record and my daughter's was very similar. I had scholarship offers from one. It was a very small scholarship and still my most expensive school. She had scholarship offers from 11 of the 14, so most of the schools provided her some type of support. And when you looked at the final net tuition and fee cost at least 3 of those institutions, the 3 that were the cheapest, and they were all public 4-year institutions, it really wasn't much different than what I had paid in the 1980s. And if you really restated it in current dollars, because of course inflation has changed the value of the dollar, it was much cheaper than what my parents paid to send me to school. Now you may think I'm lucky. My daughter was paying a lot less and she was unique. Actually, her cost was about 30% above the national average for students at public 4-year universities. So it wasn't actually unusually low. And this really comes from a study from the College Board. The other thing we see with the College Board study is that the cost of net tuition and fees has gone down over the last 10 to 15 years, and not just in terms of restated dollars, but in actual dollars. It is simply cheaper than it was 10 to 15 years ago. And this is surprising to a lot of people, and I think we often find those who maybe aren't as informed, don't work at a university like I do, know less. We actually had a first-generation college student on one of our conversations yesterday, Gavin at SIU Carbondale, who talked about being surprised how cheap it was for him to go to college and really did not add to his parents' debt and was able to get through in 4 years. We also spent some time talking with students here at SIUE, and we'll hear right now from a student named Colin.
With how busy I am with this degree and just as a person, I probably wouldn't be able to work enough to supplement the costs.
The cost increase that we did see for my daughter, I should point out, is room and board. And really more so when she moved off campus, because simply the cost of housing and the cost of food has gone up. So it wasn't the universities were charging more, it simply costs more for housing and food. So that was definitely much, much greater than it was back in my day. We also saw increases in technology costs, laptops, phones, all the things that simply weren't available when I was in school. So there wasn't that our students don't have need or don't have a lot of costs, but it's not on the tuition and fees part. And we heard actually from one of our SIUE students, Emma, about this.
I definitely had to learn budgeting to survive groceries and paying rent.
The last thing I'll talk about is really the recruitment after acceptance. It was much more aggressive. After I was admitted to those 5 schools, basically got an admissions letter and get back to us if you're coming and if you're not. And that was about it. I don't think I heard from anybody directly at that point. So it's kind of if you come, you come. If you don't, you don't. We're not really all that concerned about it. In my daughter's case, most times she was assigned to contact someone to reach out to. A lot of them reached out to her pretty aggressively through calls, emails, all types of different ways of doing it. In fact, part of the reason we stopped at 14 is she got tired of getting so many calls and emails. So she said that's pretty much enough. But the other thing that was interesting was at 3 of those institutions, she actually got additional scholarships by simply waiting that until that May 1st time. So there was a much more aggressive recruitment from the moment she was accepted to the time she finally announced what her decision was. Now, I will say none of this was surprising to me, but there's something a little different about directly experiencing something that helps you better understand what's really going on. And I say, well, it was not surprising to me. I think for most people, what I just described would be surprising because it goes against the common narratives. So in order to help you better understand the admissions process today, I'm honored to introduce our guests. We have from SIU Carbondale, Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management, Wendell Williams, and from SIU Edwardsville, Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management, Andy Benoit. I want to thank you both for joining us here today. So first, I want to start with finding out a little bit more about each of you, and we'll start with you, Andy. How did you get working in higher education, and what led you to your current role?
Well, it's great to be here. First, when I began in my profession, I was entering higher education as a first-generation college student. I should have been a stop-out many, many years ago, but people vested time and effort in me to help me progress along the way, and so that interest was always piqued in me in higher education. So I began as a Greek advisor for a couple of months, and they said, you'd be a really good recruiter. So I started in that role, and here I am 30 years later. So I rose up progressively at institutions in Louisiana, South Carolina, and Texas before coming here. And my entire profession was surrounded around that basic premise of providing educational opportunity and access, that very same opportunity that I had, helping students find their purpose and their potential for higher education. So that's what the cornerstone for me has been and what drives me every day in this particular role.
Thank you, Wendell.
Well, thank you, President Mahoney. What started me in higher education was actually an internship at my master's level program in rehabilitation counseling. I started that in one of the TRIO programs, and after the summer was over with, I was offered a position there. And so, looking for that first position, it was very attractive. Within a few years, I was associate director for University College, helping students to decide upon a major, taking care of testing services, supervising the TRIO programs, and from that point forward, moved on over to migrating into student success and student enrollment management. 40 years later, the desire, the love is still there, that we have an opportunity to see a life, influence that life, and help to change a life for the better.
Well, thank you, both of you. It's interesting. I think a lot we see people go into being faculty members because they want to work with students, but we forget that there's a lot of jobs, and your jobs are both like that, where you get to really work with students closely, and that's rewarding. Now, one of the things I've noticed, and I'm really interested to hear your all's perspective, is the role of enrollment management leaders really seems to have changed a lot over the last 20 years. I think when I started as a faculty member, I couldn't even tell you who was the head of enrollment management, and I was actually pretty involved in the recruitment process, so I wasn't uninvolved. So I'll start with you, Wendall, this time. Kind of describe a little bit how the role of enrollment management leaders has changed over the last 20 years, and why do you think that change has occurred?
Sure. I think the primary reason that you see the changes now is that enrollment is the number one source of funding in higher education. You know, with cutbacks at the state level and other, the inability to constantly increase tuition, the ability to manage the enrollment became a lot more important. And so you saw a migration of enrollment management reporting to the provost to reporting directly to the CEO at that institution. And so I think it has more to do with how important enrollment is to the institution that we've seen a lot of this migration.
I would agree with that, what Wendall said. And I think the powerful thing I would say is whenever I was in South Carolina, one of our board members actually used this comment, and they said, we as an institution used to be state funded, now we're state located. So we have to be very, very concentrated on what we do to cultivating our enrollment and the strategies surrounding. 30 years ago, when I started as a recruiter, you know, the solution to everyone's problem was go get more freshmen. Well, that's not how you build enrollment anymore, especially when we're in the situation we are right now with the enrollment cliff. We have to diversify our enrollment nowadays, and it takes concerted effort that can actually plan effectively, utilize data effectively, but also be able to coordinate campaigns and different things across campus to be able to support the effort. Because to your point, President Mahony, is you had involvement as a faculty member. Right now, you need someone to be able to coordinate on the campus to make sure that we are allocating the right attention, the right resources, and the right effort to be able to really develop and sustain an enrollment effort that can help the university reach its goals.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you said, Andy, is really important for people to understand is everybody thinks about the incoming freshman class and the high school seniors transitioning, and that's still a big part of what we all do. But it's all the other segments of the population we're trying to attract. And I think for both of our institutions, if we look at our new students, I think it's roughly a third or more actually come from transfers as opposed to first-time freshmen.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And I think even that probably has changed some, you know, certainly from the time I was a student and started working in higher education. I will say, too, it's, as Wendall was talking about, the importance to the institution's financial health of bringing in more students. I remember I had a board member, also in South Carolina, tell me that our top salesperson was one of our coaches. I was like, no, it's our head of enrollment management. That's the person that really is out there selling the institution. Right. And now in addition to
that, President Mahony, we also have to look at that it's not the inability to grow the ability to grow the institution is not just affected by how many students you bring in, but also by how many students you keep. So we see a rapidly evolving change where the focus is not just on the recruitment of students, but more so on the retention of students. Here at SIU Carbondale, for every one student that we might lose in retention, it's going to take about 3 students in order to replace that student.
No, that's an excellent point. Actually, we just had a meeting as a system this morning talking about the importance of what we can do to better retain the students that we already have here. And again, that's a radical change from the 1980s where they used to do the old look to your left, look to your right. You know, 1 or 2 of you won't be here at the end, and that was almost said with some source of pride. That's not the way we view it now. It's more look to your left, look to your right. Let's make sure you're all here at the end. It's a very different idea.
And have one more with you at that.
Well, and then also the other part is we're all focusing now on how do we bring the folks back that have stopped out. That's some of the greatest opportunity we have as colleges and universities today and our new level of focus.
Yeah, and I think that will certainly increase, and you all know this better than me, but I think during COVID there was some loss of students who I think potentially could come back and benefit from that college education. So that's become even more important than it was before. Now, you both regularly talk with parents and students and other family members. From your experience, what are some of the common misunderstandings about the admissions process? And Andy, I'll start with you this time.
Well, and you touched on it. It can be cumbersome to a lot of people, and especially, I was a first generation college student. I think that more and more every year we're seeing more first generation families that really don't know how to navigate a process. And I think that as enrollment leaders and as people that are working in admissions and enrollment, we spend a lot of time working with families and helping them find their way through a navigatable process. We're trying to really take away the landmines in the process and making it as uncumbersome as possible, as really user-friendly as possible. In addition to that, figuring out ways to truly have a counseling mindset to be able to talk about not only gaining admission to the university, but really figuring out how we help them meet the cost of attendance. The one misconception that I have heard families over the years say, and it's the one that really makes me concentrate the most, is that they can't afford to come to school. And so, everything that we do to be able to package, to be able to help illustrate to a family to find their purpose when they get here, but to also help them along the way and say, we're going to help you get your goals achieved. We're going to help finance. We're going to help you navigate the process. And our investment with you is throughout the time that you're here, from the day that you step foot on our campus until graduation. That is our commitment to help you, one, begin the career that we've trained you for 4 or 5 years, or to go to the graduate or professional school of your choice, to help you navigate that and see that college is affordable for you, but it's also something that you can do.
And Wendell?
And about the only thing I would add to that is that the biggest misconception about the admissions process is that people listen to the news a little bit too much, that college is becoming unaffordable and that the process is cumbersome. They listen to the news rather than looking at the reality and the facts. We have made tremendous efforts to make the process as simple as possible. As a matter of fact, at our institution, we instituted the Say Yes campaign, where we reach out to our local high schools and any high school that has sent us more than 10 students or so. And we say, if you provide us with this particular documentation, then we will send a pre-admit to that student and allow the student to make a decision and begin the application process. So the simplification has made things so easy now that there are still so many misconceptions about how hard the admissions process is.
Yeah, and of course there's an attempt right now in Illinois to make that even easier with the direct admissions bill. And Wendell, can you talk a little bit about what that is and explain to our audience?
Sure. For select institutions around the state, there are a couple of institutions that are a little bit different in the way that they admit their students, but they're not part of the process. But the way that it works is that the state will provide to students. We provide to the state a list of our qualifications, our minimum qualifications, whether it's ACT scores, SAT scores, or GPA requirements, or any other special requirements. They filter those requirements through their database, and they send a list of schools that the students are eligible to apply to to the student. The student then, if they're interested in any of those schools, they go into the common application, complete that information, and that information is then sent to the institution saying you have a student who is interested in your institution. We then at that point begin to recruit that student or to reach out to that student to see what we can do to close the deal.
Yeah. So just another example of trying to make that as easy as possible and kind of being more proactive in reaching out to students, which I'm really a big fan of that. In addition to talking to students and their families, we talked a little bit about those misunderstandings. How do we as institutions try to correct some of those misunderstandings about costs and other things?
I think one of the things that we do, and like I'd mentioned, is we do more of a counseling model now than we ever have before. I think the opportunities that we have to do direct outreach with parents now, with students, providing opportunities for them through the campus programming, through our extension of efforts that we're doing out in the communities, I think the more opportunities we can to provide avenues to be able to answer questions, to be able to make college approachable in a lot of ways. And you take into consideration areas where there are a lot of first generation underrepresented communities who may not have as much experience. When we take the university to them, it's very powerful, because at that point, it's kind of the old saying, you meet people where they are. And that's essentially what you're doing. You're providing that access and that opportunity. But I think as we have understood the questions along the way, We know typically what the hangups for individuals are with regard to cost, with regard to navigating it. Figuring out how we approach those and going into communities, doing the outreach, connecting the students, and developing and cultivating relationships has been our focus in a lot of ways. Because if you're building those relationships and giving an opportunity, they are going to depend and connect with the individual, with the purpose, with the student, with the faculty, with the university community, and it brings them here in the process. But the opening of those doors has been something that I think has been powerful.
And we have a twofold approach. Our first approach is during the fall of the year. For those students who have been identified as eligible for admission to us, we reach individually and directly out to that student to find out what their intent is. If they have an interest in SIU or even have made a decision with us, we assign that person to an individual admissions representative, what we call our field representative. And that person, when they, instead of going out and setting up a table to see who they can get to apply, they actually go out and meet with those students to see what they need to do in order to make the final decision or to finalize it. Then in the spring of the year, what we're doing right now, in Southern Illinois, we have visited 50 high schools in the last 30 days, traveled a distance of about 1,700 miles, going around talking to the students who had applied and been admitted and answering questions. And what we have found that works the best is that many students do not understand our offer letter that we have out there, and they don't realize that just how affordable colleges are. They pass that information on to their parents, and that helps us to yield students in the process.
I want to add one other thing, and I think that Wendall hits an important part, because as we all have recruiters, one of the things that we've seen evolve over the course of the last maybe 5 to 10 years has been the evolution of the regional recruiters. Putting recruiters out in communities. I mean, we've got 4 people living in the Chicago area that recruit that area. We have folks here in Southern Illinois and Central Illinois, Northern Illinois that go out in the various communities. And so when you have the dedicated staff members that are there in those communities, you provide those direct avenues to build relationships, but it also builds a tool for the schools and the counselors and the school administrators to really have a resource for us to be able to go and spend a lot more times in the schools and the communities, with the hope that not only are we focusing on rising seniors or seniors, but starting the recruitment process a lot earlier, when they're even in middle school or and freshmen in high school, and continuing that along the way. Because the more we build the connections and the more that we start to give people a greater access to the educational opportunity at an early stage, the better we're going to get and the better the yield is going to be to help that student in the end.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and that's one of the things I've noticed too. A lot of institutions with the regional recruiters, and again, I don't recall that really being the case when I started 30 years ago. The first step in the admissions process is determining where you're going to apply. What advice would you give to students when they're choosing which schools they should apply to, other than obviously they should apply at SIUC and SIUE? But I'll start with you, Wendall, on this one.
Well, other than SIUC and SIUE, I can't think of any reason why they would apply anywhere else. But that being said, I think they should focus on 3 F's. Number 1, fit. Number 2, finances. And 3, does that institution provide to you upfront a formula that for success of your student? And the students need to make that decision as well. So fit. Does the institution have the right kind of philosophy, the strategy, how it addresses problems, challenges, and concerns? Does it provide enough support resources through the form of discounting or scholarships, or have access to scholarships that students might use to address the finances so you're going to be able to complete the process? And do they have a formula for success where they have early alert processes? They notify students of their progress and grades. The faculty are intimately involved in the success of the student. And so if they can focus on formula fit and fit, finances, and the formula for success, I think it will be very easy for them to make that decision.
And I would add to that, and certainly as we meet and talk with students and parents, one of the things I always tell students is visit at least 2 or 3 universities that you're interested in. If you can find that one university where you can feel at home, where you can feel like you can be there for 3, 4, or 5 years, where you feel that they can help you reach the ultimate goals you want to be, then that's where you need to go. When you visit a university, you can tell a lot of times when they're genuine and they're not. When you can take a look at what services are going to be provided that are going to help you be successful. Can you eat and survive? Do you like where you're going to live? All these things are important, when you think of Maslow's hierarchy and those different things. But really and truly, like Wendall said, it's about fit, and it's about whether or not that place can be a home to you. And that's why all the different activities that we're doing when we're out recruiting students at all levels is to get them to campus. If we believe that once they come to one of our campuses, that they can feel that they are connected, that they can find their purpose on our campus, they can find their niche, they can truly be a name and not a number.
Tying in with what Andy just said, that I believe that the campus has to feel that need from everyone that they might see, from the person that might be on the outside to the person who they might meet inside, to the faculty level. So the campus has to have that certain amount of to let them know that every student you see may not be a student who's already enrolled, but someone who might be looking to enroll.
Yeah, that's all a good point. I mean, I think that we focus a lot on finance, and certainly that was important and important in my day. But it's funny when I think about it, once we had finances that were fairly similar across institutions, fit, where I could actually be successful, those were the things that really made the difference in why I chose one institution over another. And so in some ways that hasn't dramatically changed over the years. Tell us a little bit about what your institutions have done to be more competitive in attracting students to apply and then choosing to attend your universities. And so, Andy, I'll start with you.
Okay. So one of the things that we've done is to enhance our efforts of starting to provide opportunities a lot earlier and giving them an opportunity to visit campus, make connections either through the programs that we are having here on campus or out in the communities. We find that level of exposition and that level of connection really gives them opportunity to get to know the university and grow a relationship that lasts a lot longer. Getting them onto our campus and truly making a connection with our academic community at that point has been really beneficial for us. One of the benefits that we have in the SIU system is that we have campuses that are comprehensive, that have great majors. We have world-class faculty. You can come into one of our campuses and truly be anything you want to be. And so what we've tried to do is really showcase those opportunities and make the connections along the way. And approaching that and blending in an opportunity to be able to showcase how we are going to make college affordable, because affordability is something that we have placed a lot of time and effort on, rightfully so, but giving the opportunity to balance it all and truly help them see themselves here and see a pathway forward. Because I think that one of the things where enrollment managers sometimes and where universities sometimes have problems is where we always try to treat people like a cookie cutter, where everything has to fit a certain mold when right now it doesn't. And we're dealing with a generation of student that is completely different at all levels. This generation is digitally native. So a lot of what we're doing is a lot more digital now. It's a lot more on demand, and it affects everything. It affects how we communicate. It affects how we issue decisions, and it affects our timeliness. And to your point, President Mahony, earlier, some universities years ago, they used to say, we'll get you a decision in a few weeks or a month or what have you. If you've got all your materials and you don't issue a decision within a couple of days, you've already lost. And so everything that we've tried to do is to try to meet this generation where they are and help them get the information they need to be successful. But our biggest thing that we've done is do all those things and really try to understand that enrollment isn't just about freshmen. It's about serving all the needs of our students at all the different levels.
All right, Wendall, what would you like to add?
I would add that what we've done is that I mentioned earlier about our Say Yes campaign, where we got our high schools to partner with us, and that we built that relationship first by the Chancellor and I going out to talk with the superintendents, with the principals, with the leaders, with the counselors. We broke the ground first to let them see the commitment that we had to their students. They then began to participate in the Say Yes campaign, and we then piggyback that with a put a lid on it. So once a student has decided, we provide them with a tangible piece of Saluki gear to let them understand that they are part of the community. And and then we clearly explain all of their options through the takeover tours to reduce the amount of melt that might be had during the summer. And we do a clear explanation of the offer letter for them and their parents so that they know exactly what is offered there, and that begins to eliminate the barriers.
I want to add one other thing. I think you hit on a really good point there, Wendell. One of the things also that a lot of us have been doing over the course of the last maybe 5 or 6 years, a lot more programming that is designed to support yield and to answer questions a little bit later in the process and truly help people understand, like you said, understand how much the finances are going to impact, understand about the next steps about living and really focus on what you need to do next and really building that tangible connection. I think we've all started, and one of the things I started years ago and I've continued is, the signs you put in people's yards, I'm in, and all those other things. They're important. It builds that relationship with the institution. And really, it's not just depending anymore on having people say, well, we've admitted you. Are you going to come or are you not going to come? I mean, we do a whole lot of work to help counsel along the way on the end, to help people reach their final decisions and really work all the way up to orientation being over and into actual enrollment in the fall.
It's interesting when you talk about the signs. I think about the two advantages. One is for the person to kind of say, this is where I'm going and I'm excited about it. But then also it advertises to their friends and other people that this is where they're going and gets more excitement about the institution. One of the other things I was going to add that I think both institutions have done well is try to find programs to get through this misinformation on cost. And I think one of the things I'm particularly proud of is the SIUE and Saluki commitments, which says if you're a family under a certain income level and certain level of family assets that you can come tuition free. And I think we've tried to do things to break through that. And I think that's kind of, some other institutions have done that, but certainly we've tried to do that as well. So we're going to start with finish with one last question. Wendell, if you could give people one piece of advice when starting the college application process, what would it be?
Go to SIUC and apply. I'm sorry. Do it early. Do it early. I think that's one of the, with benefits changing, with things changing, with MAP amounts changing, with aim high amounts changing, and the number of students who are beginning to get interested. Early is going to be very important. We have a free application period that runs from September through November. They need to make sure that by November they have decided to apply, even if they had not decided where to attend.
So I was going to steal it. If I was going to go first, I was going to say apply to SIUE, but you beat me to it. But I think the key thing there is I would say also start early, but the one thing I would encourage folks to do is, again, to visit, to truly, because it gives you an opportunity to get your questions answered and to truly look at the places you're interested in. But the other thing I would add to that is communicate. A lot of people sometimes reserve questions or are really unsure of whether or not they should ask something out loud or anything like that. No question is stupid. Everything is important in the process, and realize that the resources that the universities have are for you. Right? They are here to help you be successful. One of the things that especially a lot of first-gen and underrepresented families will sometimes, be unsure about, how to make ends meet, or what about need gaps, or how to address, paying deposits sometimes. We try to deal with all those barriers at the university level. And a lot of times when you're talking to groups of students and families, they can say, well, I can't afford to pay a $300 deposit. Well, give us a call. We can work through that. One of the things that I take pride in my job every day is I like to blow up barriers, because I don't think that when we have a responsibility to help provide the opportunity for folks. And if we tell them, we can help you with this, there are ways the university can help you to be successful. So I think, starting early and communicating with individuals and keeping all of your things on the table, and we can work through them with you. That's what I would say.
Well, thank you for the good advice from both of you. And thank you, Wendell and Andy, for joining us for this episode. We appreciate you being here. Make sure thank you, Wendell. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Apple and Spotify so you don't miss an episode. You can also find our episodes on our website, siusystem.edu/podcast. As we wrap up this episode, I want to acknowledge our production team on the Office Hours podcast, SIU Edwardsville graduate student Solomon Amandi, and the SIU system leader for marketing and communications, Katie Sheehan. I also want to thank Jason Church at WSIE Radio here on the SIUE campus for his guidance and for letting us use the studio for recording. And last but not least, thank you to all of our listeners for carving out time in your day to listen to us and maybe even learn a little bit. So thank you very much.
Be sure to join us next time on Office Hours for further conversation with the people who work in and study higher education. Special thanks to Kara Baldus-Merriman and Daniel Merriman for the use of their composition Writer's Block as the Office Hours theme song. And thank you for listening to Office Hours with SIU System President Dan Mahony.